The breaking point didn't come from gunfire or explosions. These battle-hardened survivors of Rommel's campaigns had faced death countless times. They'd stared down Shermans in the desert. They'd endured Allied bombing runs. Nothing on any battlefield had prepared them for what they witnessed. America's industrial heartland stretched before them like another planet. Mountains rose green and massive. Every single driveway held an automobile. Factories churned out bombers as if they were toys. The sheer scale made victory seem impossible for Germany. One moment would crack their worldview forever. June 1943. A small Texas town called Mexia. Railroad tracks cutting through the night. Werner Burkhardt's fingers shook as he gripped his pencil. The diary entry could mean solitary confinement if discovered. Perhaps worse. But he had to record what he'd seen. The Americans aren't deceiving us. This wealth is real. Everything contradicted 3 years of Nazi promises. Through that train window, electric lights blazed across endless Texas plains. Every farmhouse glowed bright as day. Shop windows gleamed. Street corners sparkled with defiant illumination. The clock showed past 10 at night. Germany had lived in blackout darkness since 1940. Cities fell silent and black after sunset. Here electricity flowed without limit. Light poured from every building like water from a broken dam. Burkhardt wasn't alone in his shock. Behind him sat 1,850 Afrika Korps veterans. These men had pushed the British to Egypt's gates. Desert war had scarred and hardened them. Now they rode as prisoners in cushioned railroad coaches. Not cattle cars, not freight wagons. Comfortable passenger seats. The entire population of Mexia had gathered to watch. None of those curious faces knew they were witnessing history. This moment began one of the most devastating psychological campaigns ever waged. These soldiers believed America was weak and crumbling, ready for collapse, incapable of real warfare. What they would witness in coming weeks would destroy those beliefs piece by piece. The real battle wasn't fought with bullets. It was fought between propaganda and truth. Tonight, truth blazed brighter than any desert sun. To understand how these men's faith crumbled under Texas lights, we need to go back. Back to the North African collapse that delivered them into American hands. Desert winds carried more than sand in 1943. They carried the death rattle of the Afrika Korps. After months of brutal fighting, General Jürgen von Arnim surrendered. Nearly 250,000 German and Italian troops laid down their arms. The largest Axis capitulation since Stalingrad. These weren't green recruits fresh from training. These were veterans who'd crossed deserts under fire. Men who'd earned Montgomery's grudging respect. Iron crosses decorated their uniforms. Now they stood defeated, drained, and bewildered. For the prisoners, defeat meant more than military failure. Their entire worldview was cracking. Nazi broadcasts had painted America as chaos incarnate, a mongrel nation falling apart. Economic collapse was certain. German discipline would triumph over American weakness. But even in Algeria's makeshift camps, those myths started dying. American efficiency rivaled Germany's finest moments. Thousands of prisoners were processed daily with stunning precision. Cameras clicked. Identity cards emerged from printing machines. Medical examinations proceeded with assembly line speed. Officers addressed them in perfect German. Geneva Convention rules were explained in calm, measured voices. For many captives, this organized fairness was their first glimpse of truth. Then came the food. White bread appeared on metal trays. Real coffee steamed in metal cups. Meat was served not once, but twice daily. Frontline soldiers hadn't seen such luxuries in months. Some suspected trickery, a performance staged for their benefit. It wasn't theater. This was standard American military rations. Before they ever saw American soil, the prisoners began grasping an uncomfortable reality. The United States wasn't just wealthy. It was organized, relentless, and nothing like Goebbels's cartoons. North Africa's collapse had delivered them into captivity. What awaited wasn't humiliation or chains. Something far more dangerous to Nazi ideology was coming. Full exposure to America's industrial and social power. The Atlantic crossing began with steel and steam. Captured soldiers were loaded aboard Liberty ships. To German eyes, these vessels seemed impossible. The ship beneath their feet, the SS Robert E. Peary, had been built in 4 days at Kaiser shipyards. Most dismissed this as propaganda lies. Yet evidence surrounded them everywhere they looked. Fresh welded seams gleamed. Paint was still wet in places. Engines hummed with perfect rhythm. These weren't miracles. They were routine production. As the convoy pushed westward, psychological demolition deepened. Feldwebel Kurt Zimmermann from the 90th Light Division watched sailors casually discard food. His unit would have fought over those scraps. Half-eaten steaks went overboard. Whole loaves of white bread followed. Milk was poured into the ocean without thought. To prisoners, this waste wasn't carelessness. It was a terrifying display of abundance. America possessed so much that even excess meant nothing. The ships became floating universities of industrial capacity. Talkative guards explained how Liberty ships were assembled. 250,000 parts manufactured in 32 different states. Engines built in separate factories. Transported by rail. Installed as complete power plants with incredible speed. Germany couldn't imagine such coordination. Overhead, radar antennas swept the seas constantly. Technology the prisoners thought rare and secret was standard equipment here. Norfolk Naval Base rose before them like a cathedral of iron. August 1943. Docks stretched beyond the horizon. Cranes moved with tireless precision. Entire cargo fleets loaded and unloaded in single days. One German factory worker among the prisoners counted 50 cargo ships in view. Each was serviced by machines that replaced teams of men and horses. For the first time, many admitted what they couldn't say aloud. Germany couldn't match this scale. The journey wasn't just transportation. It was revelation. Every mile carried them further from Nazi myths, deeper into the crushing reality of American power. The Norfolk train cut through American darkness like a steel serpent. Its cars held defeated veterans whose faces pressed against cold glass. What they witnessed outside would shake their beliefs more than any desert defeat. Every small town blazed with light. Shop windows glowed invitingly. Street lamps burned without concern for fuel. Houses sparkled with electricity in every room. In Germany, blackout curtains sealed villages in suffocating darkness. Here, illumination seemed infinite. The prisoners didn't ride in cattle cars. Pullman coaches surrounded them with padded seats, sleeping berths, and dining cars dressed in white linen. One American sergeant actually apologized for the air conditioning. "It wasn't cooling properly," he muttered. For men who thought such luxuries belonged only to Hitler's personal train, the experience felt surreal. Along the tracks, factories pulsed with power through the night. Parking lots overflowed with automobiles, not officers' cars or party officials' vehicles. These belonged to dock workers and machinists. Ordinary laborers drove their own cars. This reality shattered German beliefs about wealth and elites. Even railway yards displayed mechanization beyond imagination. Automated coal loaders worked without human hands. Electric pumps moved tons of material. Machines saved hours of manual labor. One engineer among the prisoners calculated figures that stunned him. A single American rail yard consumed more electricity hourly than entire Berlin districts used daily. The train rolled past the Alcoa plant in Tennessee. Furnaces devoured more power than whole German cities. Near Louisville, synthetic rubber plants stretched across the horizon. They produced yearly what Germany struggled to achieve in decades. Then came Detroit. At Willow Run, B-24 bombers slid off assembly lines at 1 per hour. Prisoners stared at rows of half-finished aircraft gleaming under floodlights. They'd been told American planes were flimsy and hastily built. Instead, they saw steel, precision, and abundance that eclipsed belief. The ride across America wasn't simply prisoner transfer. It was immersion in another world, where industry roared without pause, where ordinary citizens lived with comforts German propaganda had declared impossible. Late summer 1943 brought the psychological confrontation to its breaking point. Afrika Korps veterans were scattered across Texas, Oklahoma, and the Midwest. Every day revealed another hammer blow to unshakable myths. The first shock came in farm fields. German farm boys watched American combines devour acres of wheat in single sweeps. Machines did the work of 100 men. In Kansas, one prisoner recorded that a single grain barge held enough food to feed his entire village for 5 years. California orchards stretched to the horizon. Fruit was discarded for minor blemishes. Food Germans would have treasured was bulldozed into soil to stabilize prices. The sheer agricultural abundance forced a painful admission. The Reich couldn't feed itself while America fed the world. Inside the camps, revelations continued. Wooden barracks contained electric lights, flush toilets, hot showers, and central heating. Comforts most prisoners had never known at home. Kitchens prepared meals of meat, eggs, and milk in quantities that eclipsed German rations. Regulations required cooks to prepare surplus, guaranteeing every man ate well. The excess was thrown away. Prisoners wept, throwing away bread their families hadn't tasted in years. Christmas 1943 arrived across hundreds of camps. American churches, civic groups, and children sent packages to their enemies. Cigarettes, candy, warm clothes, handmade cards arrived daily. Choirs sang carols in German. At Camp Herne, women delivered cakes and cookies baked at home. For the very men who had fought against their husbands and sons. To prisoners, this kindness was unbearable. They'd been told America was a mongrel nation, weak and corrupt. Instead, they found generosity from strangers. Humanity extended even to enemies. For many, it was the final fracture in their loyalty to Hitler's cause. The climax came when they glimpsed total war machinery. Prisoners taken to work sites saw women welding steel at Higgins Industries, building 700 landing craft monthly for invasions still to come. They saw black workers operating heavy machinery, teenagers drilling steel plates. Nazi ideology claimed this was impossible in democracy, yet production never stopped. 3 shifts, 24 hours daily, 7 days weekly. Factories produced more monthly than Germany built yearly. News of Normandy reached camps in June 1944. The last illusions collapsed. Watching newsreels of 6,000 ships and 11,000 aircraft storming France, the prisoners understood. Their war was lost not only on battlefields, it was crushed under the overwhelming weight of American industry, agriculture, and humanity combined. Their belief in the Reich had withered beneath the blinding light of reality. Defeat had seeped into their bones already. But captivity revealed consequences far beyond battlefields. By late 1943, tens of thousands of German prisoners were scattered across the American heartland. They were assigned to work in agriculture and light industry. Geneva Convention rules prevented direct war production work, yet every assignment exposed them to America's economic scale. In New Jersey, prisoners toured a Campbell soup factory. They watched automated lines process more tomatoes daily than German facilities managed monthly. At Republic Steel in Ohio, they witnessed blast furnaces spitting out 10,000 tons of steel daily. More than the Reich produced, even with slave labor. Near Detroit, they saw the River Rouge complex, a city of industry employing 100,000 workers. Each worker drove to work in a personal car. Some families owned 2 automobiles. To men who grew up believing cars were elite luxuries, this was more powerful than battlefield defeat. Inside camps, education transformed defeat into instruction. Universities sent correspondence courses. Professors lectured on democracy, economics, and science. Thousands of prisoners enrolled eagerly to learn. Doctors were astonished by hospitals stocked with penicillin and advanced equipment, unavailable in Germany since 1941. Mental health care, unheard of in the Reich, was provided freely. Soldiers who once believed mercy was weakness now experienced it as strength. Most devastating was the confrontation with truth. As American forces liberated concentration camps in 1945, photographs and films were shown to prisoners. At first, many dismissed the evidence as propaganda. But letters from home confirmed the horrors. The images were undeniable. Men who had fought proudly for the Reich now realized they had served criminals. Their sense of honor collapsed alongside their loyalty. By war's end, over 40,000 German prisoners had completed education programs. Tens of thousands more had worked in farms and factories. Nearly all had seen the face of a nation their leaders had mocked. They had been treated with dignity, even kindness, by people who had every reason to hate them. It wasn't bombs or bullets that completed their defeat. It was the overwhelming reality of a free society's prosperity and humanity. When the war ended in May 1945, trains that once carried Afrika Korps veterans into Texas now bore them toward shattered Germany. They returned not only with memories of defeat, they carried visions of another world. They had seen a society where abundance was ordinary, where workers drove cars, where farmers harvested oceans of grain, where enemies were treated with dignity. These impressions became seeds planted deep in their minds. In the late 1940s and 1950s, those seeds bore fruit. Former prisoners became teachers, engineers, diplomats, and farmers. Men who studied English in American camps returned to rebuild German schools. Farmers who marveled at American tractors brought new methods to their fields. Officials who debated democracy behind barbed wire rose to shape West Germany's political future. The Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle of the 1950s, carried echoes of prison camp classrooms and American harvests witnessed through train windows. For historians, this transformation was extraordinary. Nearly 372,000 German prisoners passed through American camps, yet fewer than 1% ever attempted escape. Most rated their treatment as good or excellent. Decades later, thousands maintained correspondence with American families who had guarded or employed them. At reunions, men who arrived as enemies returned as friends. They thanked the United States for showing them a different path. The legacy was more than economic. It was moral. The prisoners learned that strength need not come from conquest. It could come from cooperation. Abundance was born of freedom, not tyranny. Dignity could be extended even to enemies. America's greatest victory wasn't measured only in ships launched or planes built. It was measured in the quiet conversion of hearts and minds behind barbed wire. What began with disbelief on a train in Texas ended as history's most remarkable transformation. The men who once marched for Hitler returned home as reluctant ambassadors of democracy. Their story reminds us that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't destruction, it's example. The light shining across Texas in 1943 would help illuminate Germany's rebirth for generations to come.